Well, it's the day after the night before, and what a night it was in Adelaide as England swept India aside to reach the final of the World T20. So myself, Eoin and Nasser have travelled here to Melbourne. England, of course, will take on Pakistan, weather permitting. We are here, but your kit isn't here.
No, hence my dress
Hand
code.
luggage only and luggage in another town, is that
Yeah, a
it?
couple of Strepsils and a paracetamol I have with me.
Well, you're all set.
All set, ready for the final.
How impressive was that last night?
Unbelievably impressive. I think it's the performance that England have been looking for throughout the whole of the tournament. They came in from Pakistan, having competed really well, chopping and changing their team, and then played Australia in a bilateral series and put in some really convincing performances. But since then, we've not seen anywhere close to the best of Jos Buttler's team. But against India, it was as good a performance as I can remember an England white ball team playing. And considering the context of the game, being a World Cup semi-final, I think it's as accomplished as any performance.
Can you remember a better all-round performance from England in white ball cricket?
No, I think Morg sums it up pretty well. To me, I think he was mind-blowing last night as well, and to put it in a pressure situation like that against India, you know, one of the most accomplished T20 sides they have, with all the experience in their ranks in T20 cricket and tough players that they have who produce the goods. But also the injury list. I mean, England lost two key players in that game, leading up to that game in Milan and Wood. But also before the injuries, they've had 3 or 4. So it wasn't like the England A team. It just shows the depth of English white ball cricket, of T20 cricket. Something that he started all that time ago. You lost 1 or 2 players, 7, 8, 9 years ago, and it was like, okay, this is a concern now. Now, if you lose a player on the eve of a game, someone can step in and just produce the goods, really.
And on that point, with Chris Jordan coming in, I mean, I know there are other headline acts that we'll talk about, but we should make sure we give him credit because he's played 1 game since August after a bad break to his finger into a semi-final of a World Cup against India, and Jos Buttler asked him to bowl 3 overs straight at the death. I mean, what a way to come back into international cricket.
Yeah, it sums up the guy. I mean, he is the ultimate professional. He's the ultimate team man. He's unbelievably experienced. But even with all that in the bank, coming into such a significant game and playing a pivotal role, bowling at the end. Yes, he snuck an over in halfway through, which I thought was a good move by Jos. He's certainly come in and fulfilled certainly his potential and his role. But I also think that was helped with England bowling up until that point. I think the first 14, 15 overs, they put an incredible squeeze on a very tentative Indian team, the likes of Wokes and Stokes, Curran in the power play, and then the 2 spinners, just creating things, getting the ball moving around and creating a little bit of doubt to push India back a little bit.
What decisions and tactics did Jos Buttler get so right the other night?
I think up front, getting Adil Rashid with those right-handers. I know Eoin has started at times with Adil against India up front with their right-handers. I thought he introduced him at exactly the right time because he knew that Rishabh Pant was lurking at some stage, but also the way Adil has been bowling of late. I thought his up front, the field settings he had was an attacking field. He had that slip in. It just sets immediately when Rahul and Rohit are batting, 2 world-class white ball players. Just having that, it shows your faith in Wokes and Curran and your seamers. The way he rotated his bowlers, his matchups were perfect. It's not ideal bowling Jordan 3 at the end. Most of the time you want maximum of 2, but that is Jordan's skill. He said to me before, when we were debating the side the day before, that's what Jordan does anyway. So it's not like you're asking someone who's out of their comfort zone. I thought Curran was introduced at exactly the right times from the right end. Liam Livingstone didn't bowl Mo because, again, Liam Livingstone, the matchups and the right-handers were absolutely spot on. It's an odd one because we all talked about the short boundary square. And up until the last 3 or 4 overs, I think India had 2 sixes. And so, it shows that the captain has got the right bowlers at the right ends, but it also shows how well those bowlers have bowled and their lengths and their lines, that they've protected those short boundaries against some big hitters.
I'm just going to come back to the point that Nas makes there about putting the slip in. Reminds me of your mate Brendan McCullum. Was it the cake tin when he sort of put 3 or 4 slips in and the batsmen were thinking, oh my goodness, it's swinging around corners, and actually it did nothing. It's quite a psychological thing, isn't it?
Absolutely, and certainly from a captain's point of view, you talk about tactics and strategy, and tactics is recognising something, an opportunity to do something and implementing your plan, and then strategy is actually recognising when there's nothing to do and trying to create something from nothing. And I think Jos did that yesterday. It didn't swing throughout the whole of the power play, but certainly he kept a slip in for as long as he could, and certainly when the run rate was being kept under 7 and over, which is controlling that period of the game really, really well. He read it perfectly, because the longer you can keep that in, the more doubt you can create, like Nas says.
What about the decision at the toss as well? I mean, he explained to us last night, he was humming and hawing. He looked at the stats. The stats were not going in his favour, winning the toss. But also to get the Kohli run chase out of the equation and make him try and set a target.
Yeah, I like it. Obviously, him mentioning it after the game, it means that it weighed considerably on him. He was a little bit unsure, but I like the fact that he went with his gut. You can be fed all the information in the world. The stat of 11 captains in the 11 games there that have won the toss have gone on to lose the game regardless of what they've done. He said he sort of laughed at it and looked upstairs and hoped it wasn't him. But again, he backed his strength. He fancied a chase. And again, considering the opposition that he's playing against, it works in their favour as well.
And importantly, that last point is vital. You see, India are a side that when they know, so say England are batted first and gone and smashed 200, then those openers and that top order can't bat. They have to put their foot down. And you know those Indian players have the ability. You cannot tell me Rohit, Rahul, Virat, Surya Kumar Yadav, that lineup, they would have gone harder, quicker. And that is how they should have played. When batting first, they don't do that for some reason. They go into their shell a little bit. They go for a par score. I thought Ath made a really good point last night at the end about it's not about the par score, it's about the winning score. And a par score against England is not going to be good enough with this England batting lineup.
The other thing about the tactics when I was watching Jos operate in the field is the important role Moeen Ali plays as his lieutenant. Jos is almost allowing him to move fielders left and right.
Very noticeable, and not just noticeable, we've talked about it when Jos is keeping to a faster bowler and he's 30, 40 yards away from Jordan at the death of the innings. Then you need Stokes and Moeen maybe, or Mo, because Stokes will be out on the boundary. But actually there was times when Jos was stood up to Adil and Liam Livingstone, and Mo was in, again, good captaincy, having a slip in, because he didn't start with a slip in the early stages of the tournament, but he's got a slip into his spinner. And it was Mo, and Mo was 2 yards behind Jos, waving fielders around because Jos has got so much on his plate. But again, that's what this side, leadership is not about one man or woman. Leadership is about 11 cricketers out there all taking responsibility. And I think Jos is quite happy just saying, go on, if you see something, please mention it. He doesn't strike me, you know him better than me, he doesn't strike me as a sort of captain as to go, look, I'm in charge, what are you doing back there, Mo? He wants to give responsibility to people.
Yeah, he does. And he wants to empower players around him to get better and take on the responsibility of taking on big decisions, because ultimately he will feel that when individually you're under pressure or the team is under pressure, you have to be able to think on your feet. You look back at South Africa throughout the course of World Cups, when they've had to think for themselves or think on their feet under pressure, they haven't managed to do it. And certainly when I was captain and in the environment and culture that we tried to create, we recognised that as something that we could potentially get better at. And I suppose the other attribute that Jos has is that he's not afraid of other people getting better around him. You have a lot of captains and leaders around the world that want to be the best player in the team, and when other people either move up in stature or threaten their status, they pat them down a little bit and they want to be the main man. That is not Jos Buttler. He wants people to grow around him, question what he's doing, and ultimately decide what's better for the team.
A bit of psychology and captaincy and leadership. Would having someone like Moeen Ali in your side when you were captain sit comfortably with you, or would you want to be the guy? Don't you start moving my fielders around. I've got the plan here. I've set it up with the bowler.
No, I'd be fine with that. Often with the bowlers were like that. Absolutely, the bowlers, you want your field. Coffee would be like, I don't want that, Skip, or Caddy or whatever. Yeah, fine, but make sure you get it right if you're going to set your own field. No, I had absolutely no problem. What I had a problem with was often in our era when things were going well, there was
Lots
a lot
of
of arm,
advice.
there's a lot of advice and there's a lot of arm waving, and suddenly when Australia are 420 for 3 at Brisbane on day one, the words aren't coming from all the other 10 cricketers. So that is when you find out about your team really, and that's when you find out about your teammates and leaders, is in those difficult times under pressure.
So the bowling and the tactics spot on, that was part one, but what about the run chase? That was brutal.
Yeah, incredible really. As good as Jos and Alex have played in the tournament and probably throughout their career, when you consider the threat of Arshdeep Singh and Bhuvaneshwar Kumar with the ball swinging, it did swing a lot like it has done for them throughout the whole tournament, but they countered it. They moved down the wicket. Rishabh Pant came up for I think 1 or 2 balls and that was it. I can't see why he didn't stay up to try and trap the batters in their crease while the ball's moving around. It's certainly what the England batters wouldn't have liked, but once they got going then, and particularly in that first over, Jos played some beautiful shots through the offside, then worked them through the leg side, and from that moment on, it's incredible. I mean, Alex Hales played this shot off Bhuvaneshwar Kumar. It was a knuckle ball, fanced down the wicket, and the ball, you can see it on the slow-mo, it's moving around slowly in the air, and he creamed it over long off to the longest side of the ground for 6. And it's just, the standard just continues to get higher and higher. The skill level is incredible. But you'd sit there and you question India's planning. They had plan A. They didn't have a plan B. It was almost like they were shell-shocked. If it swings, we'll take wickets. And if, past that, we don't have another plan. So England were excellent, forced a huge amount of pressure on India and made them perform badly, but they came back with nothing.
You'd want a lot of money if you'd had a bet on playing India in a semi-final and Phil Salt batting at 3 wouldn't get in.
But we were chatting on the way down here that the fantastic performance, the downside is some of the other batters haven't had much time at the crease.
Yeah, I hear Hales and Buttler have scored 400 runs between both of them. The middle order of Livingston, Ali, Brooke and Stokes, they faced 160 balls between the 4 of them throughout the whole tournament. So a little bit of a victim of their own success story. There's nothing that you can do about it. You could look back at possibly the New Zealand game or the Sri Lanka game, and probably more so the Sri Lanka game and the Ireland game, and think, if there were 1 of 2 of them that have chipped in with 40 or 50 and you get across the line confidently, that value of the balls that they've faced goes up in stock. But it's been a little bit hit and miss. And when you look, I know we'll look at Pakistan's threat, but if they get through the bulk of England's runs, which is Hales and Buttler, they'll ask questions.
It's a good point, because I was looking, I was just interviewing Shadab Khan in here. That's why we're in the team room of the Pakistan hotel at the moment. This is their team room. Matty Hayden just came down to drop off his laundry, and our Australian cameraman got very, it's Matty. Oh, Matty, can you sign this for me, please?
You are getting, you can't say, gesticulating wildly from behind the camera. What do you mean this is their team room? I mean, Key's team room has got like a golf simulator in it. We've got like a load of chairs and
used to like a dartboard,
beanbags.
Yeah, this is their team room, so I have no idea what I was going to go and say. That got completely off track. But yeah, Shaheen Shah, so I did some research. Shaheen Shah in 60-odd T20 games, in 20-odd times, that's 1 in 3, he gets a wicket in the first over. The other day he got a wicket in his first over. So that threat up front of Buttler and Hales, of Shaheen back in rhythm, finding his fitness, if he can get one, and then Salt comes in, and then that middle order is slightly exposed. But we were saying the same thing about Bhuvaneshwar Kumar. We did those stats at the last game. Bhuvi's got, Jos out 5 times. Well, Jos dealt with him and got, 13 off that over. But there is that threat, the new ball threat from Shaheen Shah Afridi.
Something else we were talking about on the way down, but we'll come back to that, because there was just one other little passage of play which I'd like to get your view on. Obviously a heavy contingent of Indian supporters, very, very loud. And they were very loud to start with, and then got quite quiet as Buttler and Hales started doing their thing. And then Hardik was whipping the crowd up into a frenzy, and then 2 balls later, Jos smoked him for 4, and it went boom. Yeah. And I looking around the Indian fielders, and I felt they all went down at that point as well.
Yeah, it's a sort of debate, isn't it? Kohli does it quite a bit when he's in test match mode and he gets the crowd revved up. Hardik was trying to do it. You know, should you be trying to lift the crowd with your cricket, or should the crowd be trying to lift you? One thing I know, and again I repeat, I don't know Jos Buttler that well, but it's that sort of stuff. There are certain people that I would rev the crowd up and try and, it was like Atherton, however much you sledged him or whatever, had no impact. Brian Lara, the more you sledged him, the better he got as a player. Jos Buttler with crowd impact and cheering and sledging, he's just too much of an Iceman to worry about that sort of stuff. And the reaction was typical Jos. He just smashed the next ball or the ball after for 4. But you're right, the crowd, we talked about going on air yesterday about the crowd and silencing the crowd. And apart from the Hardik Pandya 5 overs at the end, England managed that perfectly.
How impressive in terms of showing the character of the side has it been to go to the Gabba, beat New Zealand in a must-win game, SCG must-win game, and then of course a semi-final? I mean, there are slight mirror images of what you guys went through in 2019. That little dip, okay, we've got to sort this out, and then we go again.
Certainly, it's been in spades in the last 3 games, and when you consider the game they're going to have to play against Pakistan on Sunday, finals never go as seamlessly as you plan, and certainly with the rain that is forecast for Sunday and possibly Monday, they're going to be exposed at different stages of the 40 overs. So it's important to have tested that character throughout the group stages, just to reassure everybody within the group that when, not necessarily your backs are against the wall, but when you need to ask more of somebody or the team, you have something to give, as opposed to just nothing. Because I've played in a lot of teams before, and you get into the habit of making a bad decision when you actually need to make a simple decision under pressure to get you to that next stage, instead of looking too far ahead and making a bad decision. And this England team have done that.
You may not know this, but I've never been in a World Cup final. I don't know if I've mentioned that or anyone else. But tell us what.
Not under 12.
Yeah, I know we're not. So what would you have done? You'd have won yesterday, and you'd have had a glass of red last night, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
what would be? Just tell people what would happen between that and the toss come Sunday evening. How would you manage the team?
Yeah, so certainly things would have a lot more of a relaxed feeling and confident feeling around the group. Everybody will be delighted, and that feeling will start to rub off a little bit probably today when the team land in Melbourne and everybody gets checked in and all the chaos of a travel day starts to unfold. And certainly me as a captain and knowing players inside out, I thought it was important to get around the guys who would already be thinking about Sunday. So your guys that get nervous and anxious too far out because they're thinking too far ahead, as opposed to just how I'm going to prep tomorrow and then use as little energy on Sunday as possible before the game. So that's a start. And then you're already talking to the medical staff about the possible fitness of your 2 players that have missed out in David Milan and Mark Wood. Again, continued conversations about selection between yourself and the head coach, analyst and the other collective coaches. And then that sort of takes you into this evening. That's without even touching or speaking to the collective group, which is important because you don't want to speak for the sake of speaking, and you don't want to offload any unnecessary weight that you might be carrying around as a captain on your team. So it's important then, wake up fresh, which will be tomorrow, give a clear message, hopefully in a position to announce the team, make sure everybody's reassured that they're ready, the plans are in place, and then
Full-on training?
No, it won't be full-on training at all. Day before a game, so 2 days out for a game, if you have the time, as we've witnessed throughout this tournament. Jos Buttler and Matthew Mott have run a similar system where England go really hard and almost to an extent where it limits what they can do the following day. So it's only a run-through session, bit of a confidence booster, making sure there's absolute clarity, bit of a laugh and a joke. Lads like playing football, so they'll do that. And then any follow-up messaging by the time that you get to the hotel, which rarely happens because personally I like to do things at the ground, so everything's boxed off there and then, and you feel prepped and ready then for the next day.
I'm fascinated when you talk about not expending energy the morning of the game. In this case, it'll be Sunday morning. An evening game. There's a lot of time when you wake up, and then you've got to wait, and then you've got to think. 50 over World Cup, I know the one at Lords was slightly delayed because of rain, but you've also been in World Cups that have been evening games in T20. What is the key to not losing and expending that energy that you need for 7 o'clock when you want to probably crack on at about 11:30.
Yeah. So I think the key is answering questions that you will question in your head. So having reassurance in, you might sit in your room and think, oh, geez, what if this happens? What if Jos chucks me the new ball? Or what if I have to bowl the 6 over? I've not bowled the 6 over in this tournament so far. But England have gone through all these processes. They will not do anything out of the ordinary on Sunday. So for me, if I was captaining, I would reassure players that this has continued to be a role. This is what it will look like. Create a visual and a picture for that player, whether it's Mark Wood if he's playing bowling against Babar Azam early, what over that might be, what field he might set, reassuring his protection square of the wicket. That's what the visual will look like. And even that sort of a picture that you set will help people breathe and think a little bit longer. And again, you might tap into the psychologist. If there's more to it or more that the player needs on the game day, it can come from anybody within the team. I mean, there's some guys that like to wake up, get a coffee, either on their own, Nasser, you'd be happy with this, on your own.
On your own, yes.
But there are some that like to congregate in groups of 4 or 5, and they won't necessarily talk about cricket. They'll just go, talk about things that put a smile on the face. Maybe there are a lot of the families here at the moment. Families are always good for teams.
Mo said that the other day, actually, in an interview, didn't he?
It's great. Some of the guys have kids. Some of the guys have brought their parents. And it's brilliant to have icebreakers around it, things that you can laugh about and just normalise everything. Because a lot of the time, teams and players, you take yourself too seriously.
What about captaincy, though? Because you must have been thinking as soon as you woke up on finals day, what am I going to do, tactics, what were the matchups? I mean, Jos waking up on Sunday morning, it must be very hard for him not to stew somewhere and go, crikey, who am I bowling then? What happens if that happens? And you start playing the game out in your head in the morning, and then you're knackered by the evening.
Yeah, he will do it. He'll play it over and over in his head a lot before the game. Even today, like as a captain, I know you mentioned earlier in the trip, you saw him out and about with his headphones, just getting his own space. He might do that today, but certainly when I was captain, I'd always work back from, right, what is the worst thing that can happen? We go for 80 in our power play, right? Who am I turning to? Who are my men? Who are the possibilities of the guys coming in? And then you work back to, right, what does the best scenario look like? And then you always finish on a positive. So that you leave, I close my notebook, leave on a positive, then I'll go away, work it through in my head, go and do something I enjoy, come back to it, write down some more notes, and then that's probably it.
Interesting. Fascinating, actually. Right, before we look forward, I just want to finish off on India. If Jos Buttler had a very good day as captain, what sort of day did Rohit Sharma have?
Captaincy, like you said, they didn't have a plan B with the ball. I'd be more critical of batting, actually. I mean, he's one of the great white ball players ever. I mean, he's got 2 double hundreds, I think. Someone correct me. I think, that is just remarkable in 50-over cricket, obviously. And for him, he may have been out of nick a little bit like Babar has been in this tournament or whatever. But for him, I was down on pitch side. We do that pitch side commentator thing, and he just was just a nervy. He just didn't look like Rohit Sharma. It was a nervy innings and an innings of a man out of nick. And easier said than done. He should have tried to hit himself back into nick. Instead, he tried to survive, chew up deliveries, 60 odd for 2 after 10 overs. So I think more his batting than his captaincy. I think that's what disappointed me, because he's so much better than that, Rohit Sharma, as a batter.
What sort of challenge then Pakistan? Again, we were wandering down here, and Shaheen Shah Afridi looked unfit at the start of the tournament. He wanted to play, was rushed back a bit. It looks like he's got his mojo back, and he is so dangerous in those overs. As Nasser said, you could be 2 or 3 down very, very quickly.
Yeah, I do think that's the worst case scenario for England. I think if Pakistan had a choice, they'd make early breakthroughs. I think the only side that they haven't made early breakthroughs, they've taken more than 1 wicket in the power play in every game, bar I think it was Bangladesh at Adelaide or something like that. So they will be looking to take early wickets, and they automatically have a plan B. Each one of their pacers bowls upwards of 90 mile an hour. It's quick stuff, so they can come through here. Unlike India could, they also have a wrist spinner in Shadab who will play. They will try and bowl England out, because if England bat well for 20 overs, they score 200 or even more, and I don't see Pakistan chasing that down.
It is the best bowling attack in the tournament, definitely their bowling attack. They've not gone around the park to anyone. Even that game against India, with 8 balls to go, India needed 28. They bowled brilliantly until that point against the best batting lineup. Even without Milan and Bairstow being at home injured or whatever and all the other things that's happened, this is still the best batting lineup in the tournament. The difference is, I reckon, like I say, India had to get above par because of their bowling attack. Pakistan will feel that if they get par with their bowling, and they fielded pretty well in this tournament
They were
as well.
sharp against New Zealand.
And they didn't field particularly well in the 7 matches in Pakistan that have just gone by. So they've fielded well. So they'll feel like, and that's where, again, Babar and Rizwan will play a little bit old-fashioned compared to Hales and Buttler. They will chew up deliveries, but they've been prolific in then taking that on and getting 100 partnerships. I think those two, if they go well, then the middle order and everything, Mohammed Harris has come in.
He's offered them something different, hasn't he, now?
Yeah, and a bit of sort of arrogance and swagger of youth. 21, I think he is. He doesn't fear the situation. Sometimes when you're younger, it's like your test debut or whatever, it's like you don't understand the importance of it. It's just like a game of cricket. It's only when you get older sometimes that it becomes more important. So that would be a young lad coming in a final, actually for me would be like, watch out for this boy. He could come in and smash 50 off 20 balls and take this game away from you. So switch on as much for him as you are doing for Babar and Rizwan. But their bowling attack is what is keeping them in this tournament, not their batting lineup.
It's always the talk about, can Pakistan post par, as Nasser's just said, then even if they're under par, they're still in the game.
Yeah, they are still in the game. And again, we mentioned England's middle order earlier, have not faced a lot of balls and built a lot of confidence throughout this tournament. And with the potential weather forecast that's around, regardless of what the wicket is like, there will be something on offer. If it rains Sunday at any stage, they don't have the covers here that you roll on and the wicket can breathe. It is tarpaulin, that absolute sweat. Hessian, there you go.
Hessian mat.
Yeah, they do. But if it's under that for a long time and you lose the toss and you find yourself 3 down, I think that's probably the way Pakistan will beat England, if they can.
And silence the crowd again. There's going to be a lot, as we saw at the SCG. I don't think the MCG will be full. There'll be a bit of giving up of tickets at the moment going on.
There's quite a few going on places like eBay and Facebook about halfway through the run chase in Adelaide, I understand.
I could imagine, but it'll still be pretty full and there'll be a lot of green shirts in, but England cope with that. At Adelaide, they'll have to cope with it at the MCG. Just
going to finish up, unfortunately, on a couple of slight negatives. The absence potentially and probably of Mark Wood is actually quite big, because I was thinking back to that 7-game series in Pakistan and he didn't play every game. But he did go hard at them, the batters, for Pakistan, and it worked.
I think when you look at conditions here as well, it just suits him. And it probably works against somebody like Chris Jordan at the death, bowling his Yorkers. Straight at the MCG is so short, there's very little margin for error. So if Mark Wood isn't fit, you might even see somebody like Dave Willey come in.
Going to say, swing it.
To swing it, and then you can bowl him and Chris Wokes at the death, bowling into the wicket, forcing the Pakistan batters to hit square and create catching opportunities. So there might be another selection question for Jos Buttler.
So to be clear, that would be Adelaide because of the dimensions. You probably want an extra death bowler. MCG because the dimensions. You probably want someone who might take wickets in the power play.
Absolutely, and it just goes without saying, you have to have those ground dimensions working in your favour in big games, because if you make basic mistakes and get hit to the short side the whole time, you're going to be up against it.
Fascinating, isn't it? We should just turn up and say, save 11, try not to lose our 5th game in a row, please.
30 for 2 after 10, that'll
We've
be
just
fine.
lost to Australia, eh? And you're out the comp.
The other thing, though, the dimensions might play into England's batting lineup as well, because they've got some big hitters. In Pakistan, we've mentioned Mohammed Harris, who gives it a good touch, but England probably out-muscled Pakistan in the batting. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, unfortunately, because they've been so good, and we've touched on it earlier, those lads in the middle haven't batted much, but they strike me as pretty confident players, really. Your Liam Livingstone, Moen hits a very long ball, especially off the spin. And they've seen a lot. They've just been and faced Shadab. I think he only played 1 or 2 games, actually. He was injured, but they've seen this attack quite a bit. Obviously, Pakistan have some bad memories of the MCG from that India defeat. And the one person we haven't touched on, it's a World Cup final, is Ben Stokes. And as we saw against Sri Lanka, he has a quiet tournament, but when you need someone in a crunch situation, the highest of high pressure situations, Ben Stokes, whether he's got a few or not, he's worth his weight in gold in that middle order.
The other thing we just got to touch on is the weather. The forecast is not great for Sunday. There is a reserve day on Monday. It is marginally better on Monday. They will try and get the game done on the Sunday. The final can only be reduced to 10 overs a side, not 5 overs a side. And there is half an hour of extra time that they can use on that Sunday. Once they've started that game on Sunday, if it goes into reserve day, they'll just complete that game, if you see what I mean. Do you think that's the right thing to do?
I think so. I think 5 overs just makes it a complete and utter lottery, and that's why the Australia-England game wasn't reduced to that when it was raining. They just couldn't get back on, and it just makes it a bit of a lottery, to be honest. 10 overs is a bit more sensible. Just England, whoever's chasing with Duckworth, Lewis and Stern have to be a little bit more switched on. England had it with the MCG against Ireland, didn't they? They could have rejigged their batting lineup, worried about DLS. They didn't, and they just about to pounce with Moen and Livingstone at the crease, and the rain came down and they were knocked out. So you can't tell, because a night game at the MCG for a start, you can't look up. Also, the MCG is a bowl. You just can't. It's not like a Chelmsford. Where does the weather come from? That's where the weather comes from.
You could compare the Melbourne Cricket Ground to Chelmsford.
It's old Bill's mother or whatever Bumble used to say. That's where he comes from, over there. So you just don't know. You hope someone's across it, maybe the radar, the ground staff. You just have to be, it's an evening to be switched on. You don't want to lose a World Cup on run rate.
Super over, anyone?
I tell you what, the England lads have experienced it before. Chris Jordan has been there in a T20 game at Sharjah. I think he went for 4 against Pakistan. And got over the line. But here, we want a full game. You don't want to...
You wouldn't plan for that. Would you already be planning in your mind as a skipper?
Yeah, the guys would know who's going to bowl you over, yeah.
Right.
And
irrespective of conditions?
Yeah, so things would only drastically change on the day if you're like, right, this just doesn't suit Jordan and he's not going to go Yorkers. And actually, probably, if you were to say flat wicket, everything set fair with the MCG, I think it'd be Sam Curran. From afar, he'd bowl into the wicket. He'd bowl wide hole so you can't get it straight. So you'd set like an offside field with behind square up and make him hit to the long side.
And whatever happens, it would be Buttler and Howes.
In a super over, that's a good question. You'd have to work, so I would work back who's going to bowl it for Pakistan. And if it was obvious, then I would send out who is the most likely to counter it. I'd prefer left, right hand, to be honest.
It could be spin, you could go Mo or someone like that.
If it was spin, absolutely Mo. Yeah, and given the 2 spinners that they'd play, it'd either be Shadab or Nawaz. It might even be a Curran Mo, not even Buttler. Scenario Buttler at 3. But I'd try and work back from and try and anticipate what's going to happen.
Stokes ain't bad at them.
He's pretty good at that super overs, isn't he?
Let's not have a super over. Let's have a full game of cricket. Hopefully the weather forecast is better. Bright sunshine greets us all at the Melbourne Cricket Ground on Sunday. Join us at 7 o'clock in the morning.